opinions expressed in this podcast belong to the speakers and are not reflective of any organization. The content presented here is for general information purposes and should not be construed as advice.
Welcome back to Animal Introspective, the podcast all about animal well-being and the well-being of the people who care for them. We're your hosts. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Grace.
And in today's episode, we're going to talk about affective neuroscience and how it affects us.
Wait, we're talking about neuroscience today?
Yes, we are. We're talking about neuroscience and how it relates to our emotions, because emotional states develop in the brain and are impacted a lot by the way the brain functions and the way those chemical signals work.
Last episode, when we talked a lot about resiliency building in animals, and some ways that we can approach that is by having a clear understanding of emotional states in animals. But how can we know what an animal is feeling?
Yeah, it's so hard to know for sure, right, how an animal is feeling. And that's why there's a lot of controversy around this topic. But scientists and researchers have discovered that they believe animals do have different emotional states. They just might not be the same as we think of as emotions. So they might be less specific to events. They might be less directly related to the types of feelings we have, but they do have what's called these primal emotional states, and those impact their behaviors and can be impacted by those behaviors.
Yeah, and so we don't know 100% exactly what all these different species are experiencing, but through the work that researchers have done, we probably know that all mammals have experience with primal emotions, and most likely all vertebrates and even some invertebrates as well. And Jaak Pansep was an affective neuroscience researcher who laid a lot of groundwork on these concepts of primal emotions. Do you want to talk to us about what the primal emotions are?
Pansep defined the 7 emotional states as seeking, rage, fear, lust, care, panic, and play. And he thinks that these basic states kind of defined every type of emotion that animals could experience in their lives.
So what is seeking? And as I understand it, these terms, seeking, rage, fear, lust, they're not exactly, the idea of them is not exactly how we use these words in everyday language, but it's its own concept pertaining to neuroscience. So how do we define seeking as a primal emotion?
Yeah, so seeking is kind of this experience that animals go through in looking for resources for others of the species. It is sort of a primal drive to go out in their environment, to explore their environment, to engage with their environment, and to gain resources.
And then there's rage, and rage is a primal emotion that can arise when seeking is thwarted, and it causes animals to compete for and defend their resources that they need to survive.
Exactly. And the fear state really looks at this avoidance of situations that might cause harm to the animal or put them in situations that might be dangerous for their livelihoods.
And then for lust, that prompts animals to identify potential mates and reproduce.
Another state that's a lot more common in mammals than in other species is the care state. And this one is really looking at that connection between a maternal figure or a family group and young offspring. And it is that bond between those groups and individuals.
And then there's play, which is related in the sense of being a complex system that stimulates, especially young animals, to practice and engage in different physical activities, to learn different social limits and bond socially with each other.
And then the panic state is also related to these social bonds, and it's really tied into losing those social bonds or the potential loss for those social bonds. So it's seen not only in adult animals that are separated from a group or a family group social structure, but very strongly in young as well, looking for their family, their mother. And you see it a lot in a wide range of animals, including a lot of bird species as well.
So what were some examples of Panksepp's experiments and how they tested this hypothesis?
It's really interesting. They did a lot of research with rodents and other small animals, and they actually tested different parts of the brain that they identified through some human research. There have been some studies that have looked at which portions of the brain kind of light up under scans that indicate if a human subject is seeing something that causes them joy or causes them fear. And they've been able to identify in animals similar portions of the brain that they then could connect to electrodes and could actually stimulate those portions of the brain. So they had the negative areas as well as kind of the positive emotional state areas. And they found that the animals, when given control over turning that signaling on or off to those different areas, they actually would activate the areas that stimulated the positive emotional state sections of the brain, and then they would deactivate the areas that were kind of related to these negative emotional states. So by using this research, they were able to kind of interpret and determine that those animals were experiencing similar emotional states in those different regions, and they were impacting the animals either positively or negatively because they were able to control if they wanted to experience that or not.
It's so fascinating. And from this area of study, there's speculation that the negative states and the positive states are incompatible with each other. So if an animal is experiencing the fear affective state, they cannot simultaneously be stimulating the seeking affective state. And I think this has a lot of huge implications for animals and then also for the people working in an animal care environment.
Absolutely. I feel like it shows just a really great way to get animals to be more resilient, not only by putting them in situations where they can experience new things and grow their resilience in that way, but actually the more we can get them into these play-seeking, kind of fun, positive emotional states, then the less likely they'll be to go into the negative emotional states because those states are incompatible in both directions. Then you can see why it would be so easy for animals who are in a negative emotional state to kind of stay in that cycle of feeling those negative emotions, potentially seeing more stress signs, stress behaviors. And that's why it's so important to really give them, lots of enrichment, lots of great experiences to take them out of that state. And I think, too, from the human side, kind of some of these similar behaviors, when we experience stress or are in a panic state or a negative emotional state, it's really hard to think creatively and to come up with new ideas and new solutions, which can not only impact our regular everyday lives, but also the care of the animals. If you're stressed out at work or in whatever activities you do, it's harder to experience those creative moments of, working compatibly with your animal or brainstorming some behavioral challenges or other things that come up that animal might have. So I think that's really important for us to look at ourselves too, and how we feel and how we're experiencing the world, and then kind of add that back into the overall picture of animal care.
I know for myself, when I first started learning about affective neuroscience and the primal emotions, I began to think differently and be able to identify more what I was feeling while I was working with animals. So say if I began to feel stressed or rushed at work, I could identify that I was shifting into the fear state, and I knew that I couldn't think as creatively of a solution to whatever problem I was experiencing. And since then, it's when you're able to identify something, that's the first step of really solving the problem. So now when those situations occur, I'm in the fear state, which means that I can't be in a playful, creative state. So I can take a second, breathe for a moment, and see if I can transition into a creative state. Or better yet, potentially leave the problem solving to a different time where I'm more able to think creatively.
Absolutely. And I really think that that's a big part of what we talk about in the kind of human mental health side of the animal care field, with compassion fatigue and all of these other stressors that animal caretakers can experience. And we talk about how they need to be able to develop kind of coping skills and fun activities that they can do outside of work. And I was just thinking the other day about this is why, right? This is why we want to develop those brain skills, essentially, to be able to experience a lot of repetition of being in the positive states, so that our brains are kind of hardwired more to be able to bounce back to that when we are in these stress states. And it is sort of that mental health aspect of creating the positive environment for your brain to be in.
And I think this can also tie into feeling empathy for the people around you, especially the people that you work with. Because not only can you identify these affective states in yourself, but they can also help you understand the behaviors of the other people around you. So if you're in a stressful situation, potentially, and maybe you're being frustrated that this other person isn't listening to your ideas or seems to not be really engaging in a creative solution to a problem, you might be able to consider oh, maybe they're experiencing the fear affective state and they're not as able to dive into that creative mindset and think of an active solution to the problem. And that can allow you to feel more empathy towards that person. And instead of having that frustrated conflict, you can think about, oh, well, how can I help them achieve the creative state?
I think there's some really great tools that you can use too to change these conversations once you've identified them, like you said, and you've been able to realize that someone is in a fear state. Instead of, with humans, we would think of maybe the creative state is kind of equal to that play state or the seeking state, kind of searching for solutions or thinking creatively about your environment or whatever's going on. And in order to get them from that fear state to that creative state, you can kind of get their brains to flip over by asking them questions that they can answer that kind of get them in the direction you want to go. So instead of going back and forth with the conversation and having just a direct, well, I think this and you think that conversation, try to flip it and make it more questions. And that will start to get their brain thinking creatively and get it transitioned over into that play state or creative state from the fear state.
So enough about people. How can we get the animals that we care for into those positive, effective states of seeking and care and play?
I think there's some really great tools that we kind of already use that we can adapt to get animals more into these states. So things like enrichment, providing the animals with new, novel items or experiences that they can engage with, not only helps them to do those active play behaviors that we would see in the play state, but it can also elicit some of the seeking behaviors as well, and getting them to investigate for new food items or search out different materials like for nesting or other really important behaviors for that individual animal, as well as kind of promoting this ability to just investigate new items when they come up and want to approach new things and want to be curious about new things when they're presented in their environment.
I think one of the complex aspects of caring for animals is you have to set up their environment so that they can choose to engage in the behaviors that will provide them with an enriched life versus trying to already set them up for success. And what I mean by that in terms of like, you can either make a really comfortable, lush little hay bed for a bear, or you can instead provide them a hay bale on the opposite side of their habitat and see what they do with it. And that's kind of setting up their environment in a way that enables the animal to pursue that seeking mechanism of finding resources. And why do they need that resources? To stay warm and to sleep in, or to give birth in, to care. So it kind of all ties in together.
And I think it also gives them more resilience in the sense of being able to kind of put in their own work and potentially fail at things, which is also a really, really important thing for animals to learn how to do in order to keep them moving in some of those positive affective states rather than the negative affective states. Because if they aren't set up to have some struggle that they can work through and overcome, or know that another time they'll be successful, it will be more likely to put them into a negative affective state where they don't understand that, you know, something good will come eventually if they keep trying. So I think rather than, like you said, providing them with something that's ready-made, that's easy, that is going to be automatically comfortable and enjoyable for that animal, giving them the skills and the materials to do it themselves can be really sort of, to put a human spin on it, but empowering for the animals and allow them to make those choices and build up those kind of creative thinking muscles.
Yeah, because it's kind of like the situation of if you do make that cushy bed for them every single day, how will they react if one day the bed's not there? And will that be a more stressful experience for them if something in their world is now not there and they don't have the skills to adjust their environment to meet their needs?
And I think another kind of mindset for this is with training as well, and not just for our zoo animals, but even for our pets at home. Giving them the ability to have reinforcement for situations where they maybe even don't do exactly what is asked of them, but they react appropriately. If you think about kind of social interactions, maybe between dogs that don't know each other, if you're walking your dog and it's reactive to other dogs, setting them up for success where they can learn that there's a reinforcement that they might get if they, you know, rather than just ignoring the other dog and continuing with their walk, they look at their trainer or owner and they might get reinforced for that, or they might be able to sit or displace some of that energy by playing with a toy or doing another behavior that they can be reinforced for. I think also kind of keeps them looking creatively, keeps them in the play mindset, as well as seeking that reinforcement from their caretaker.
Yeah, I like how you said seeking reinforcement.
Yeah, it's right. It's something we don't necessarily think of in those terms, but that is a big part potentially of training and just your interactions with your animals in general. Is they're looking to you for some of that reinforcement, but they also need to kind of be playful and creative in figuring out what you're asking of them. And building off of keeping our animals engaged and seeking reinforcement in these positive affective states, what are some of the kind of tips and tricks that you use in order to keep yourself in those states as well?
Success is very reinforcing to me. Let me explain. But I know, say, for instance, if I'm working with an animal and maybe it's a new animal that I haven't really worked with before. But then I'm able for the first time to handle them successfully or feed them in a way that they respond to very well, or I'm training them and I can see that they're building a stronger relationship with me, like that feeling of improvement and of success is very reinforcing for me. And that keeps me seeking and wanting to experience that again. So I think that's like a motivator for me in those times where you're not really succeeding and something is maybe not improving and you feel stuck. What motivates me is that potential to get better. And that's what keeps me in the seeking state.
And do you think that kind of some of that motivation is external? Do you think it's an external kind of reward system where you like for other people to know that you're able to do those things? Or do you think it's internal? Because to me, it sounds like it's a really internal drive where it doesn't matter to you if other people kind of reinforce for you that those things are happening, but you're driving it from yourself. You don't need to share it with everybody, but you can share it with everybody. But it's really kind of self-driven.
Yeah, it's surprisingly internal because I definitely have the experience of enjoying that external reinforcement for someone recognizing me for a good job done. But recently I've been more connecting to that internal reinforcement of me feeling like I've achieved something. Because I think when you're working with an animal, it's like that exchange is between you and the animal, and it's not necessarily involving a third party. So I think that's kind of what it is, really. It's almost like that. It almost feels like potentially that animal is recognizing you for the work that you've done to achieve whatever goal that you had, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's so interesting because I do think that that's maybe something that is a skill that a lot of animal caretakers might need to focus a little bit of time and energy on cultivating. Because I do notice a bit maybe in the field that, and even outside of the field, I've noticed this with myself, kind of even just with regular day-to-day things, that sometimes it's hard to feel intrinsically motivated and kind of pushing yourself forward when it's a lot easier maybe and more obvious of a reward system to have other people kind of recognizing and giving you that validation and praise from the outside rather than from yourself.
I would be curious to know if there's any neuro research on this, because I'm not quite sure if there's actually a mechanism behind this or not. But it seems like those small successes that I experience are even stronger and more motivating during times of more stress. And by that, I mean during a time period where maybe there's more things kind of going wrong or not improving or not going your way. When you do get that one goal achieved and you feel success with that event, it has a stronger effect, and it's like even more reinforcing than if you were having a great week and everything was going your way. So in tough times, those little crumbs of good things have more of an impact. I'm just curious if that is some sort of true neuroscience mechanism in there. I have no idea. But I wonder if that's also a skill that you can kind of build. Because I think that it's easy to fall into like a pessimistic mindset of it's a really busy week and I'm having a tough time and I'm having this problem and then nothing's good. And then even if something good happens, it's like you're not even really engaging it because you're in that pessimistic mindset. And I wonder if you can train more to be in the seeking state and look for those small glimmers of success and really glom onto them and use that as something to carry you forward and more into an optimistic mindset.
Yeah, and I wonder if, like you said, flipping your mindset to even seeking for the positive states will start to put your neurochemistry into a positive state, right? Like if you're starting to think about where can I find these little bits of positive going on, will that put you into that seeking state, which then makes you less compatible with the negative affective states, and then helps you to find more positivity and helps to kind of build this cascade of positive events and positive mindsets going on. And then I wonder how we can do that for our animals too, right? Like that's kind of what we're talking about with providing them with opportunities to succeed, but also to fail, but to fail in a way that they can learn from and that they can, you know, kind of being reinforced from and get this resilience built up to allow them to access the kind of positive mental states more easily.
Neuroscience is really so interesting, and there's so much that I don't know about, and we're not experts by any sense of the word at all, but it's something that we like looking into. So if you listening, if you want to learn more about Jaak Panksepp and his work with affective neuroscience, you can check out the links on our social media, and all of that information will be in the description of the episode as well. So with that, let's talk about what we're curious about this week.
So right now I am super curious about different training styles and kind of how trainers work with those styles with different species and kind of in different environments, you know, the differences between horse training, zoo training, dog training, and kind of that wide spectrum of training can kind of look similar through the positive reinforcement lens, but also be very individualized to each species, each animal, and each kind of event going on.
Yeah, I recently started working with a raptor, which is, I have not worked with raptors before, so I'm learning a lot of things for the first time. And so now I'm very curious about like falconry and the training that's done in a falconry setting, because it's just something that I really haven't been exposed to much. And there seems to be a lot of kind of different approaches that you don't maybe always see in like other training spaces. So I'm so curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, I don't know that much about falconry either, and I'd be really interested to learn more about it. If you have anything that you're curious about, or if you have any different types of training styles like falconry experience, let us know. We would love to hear from you and kind of get your perspective. Thank you so much for listening today. We hope you join us next time. All of the links that we discussed in today's episode can be found in the description, and check out our social media as well. We want to know what you're curious about, so let us know.